Good morning, everybody. Anne and I have been chatting already for like 45 minutes. How do we tackle this? What are some good strategies that we can involve people and engage people and ask questions and have more people start to, or give people the confidence to come and talk. So today we're going to look at why don't people talk? And we've got some historical events that have possibly set a precedent. But now the world's different. The world is very different. And I'm an avid follower of Aaron Smith-Levin and was interviewed by him last week, and also Chris Shelton. So we're starting to get the word out. But the way Aaron works his program is that there's something called the SPTV, so the Suppressive People TV, where it's a decentralized way where it invites people to come up and start a channel and just start talking, because we've all got different stories, we've got different ways of approaching these issues, and it's much harder to control, if you like. So the world is different now with the internet. And I know that Landmark really struggled with the internet when it first came out. So I'm thinking, let's just get as many people talking as possible. Even if it's private, it doesn't matter. There's something about airing these issues that have happened. So we're going to have a look today at why aren't people talking? Anne, hello, welcome. You're doing an awesome job. I've been listening to your interviews with Aaron and Chris, and there's so much material to talk about. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
thank you, Gail. I shared with you privately, but I found the transcript. I have a lot of us. There's only four of us talking publicly, but there's a lot of us talking privately, and we'll get into that today a little bit why that might be. But somebody in a group that I'm a part of found your ABC interview from 2009 as well. And anyway, so it's like people kind of have been talking, but you're so right. A little bit here and a little bit there and over here and over there. And Landmark is quite effective at burying that stuff and writing out those little storms, those little storms. And
well, they have been, because of the way the structure of centralized organizations. So it was the ABC, which is a media outlet here in Australia. They're one of the alternative. They're still funded by government, but it's a centralized organization, and it's easy for Landmark to send them a letter, cease and desist, but they did have Nancy Sapolsky agree to being interviewed. And it was interesting, like at the time, I've almost forgotten about that interview. A couple of people have come up, mentioned it. So the journalist contacted me and we had a great conversation. I can't remember, I think I was writing something. I was starting a blog and I was writing something, and she found me because I was being quite open about my experience with Landmark. So we talked, we got on really well. And then I went into the studio. Oh, she asked me if I knew anybody else that wanted to talk. So I got the word out, that out of probably 15 people, one person said yes. Sani Bennett. So Sani is no longer with us, and I know she would be really happy to have her name mentioned here because she was quite a critic of Landmark. She was a Mormon, and she had, yeah, so yeah. So she had some comparisons. But then coming back to the interview, so I met up with the woman, I can't remember her name, and she sat me down in the studio, and she started with the background music of, oh, so we're looking at the cults in Australia and how damaging they are, and now we've got a victim from Landmark Education. And when I heard that, and she asked me to introduce myself, I was quivering. I was like, oh my
it's
God, I
Hagar
can't.
Cohen is the
Yeah,
interviewer.
yeah. I'm like, I can't talk about this. I cannot. The way she set it up, my voice, when I started to talk, the words wouldn't come out. And I was like so scared. And then she was trying to comfort me and asked another question. And I'm just like, I walked out. I'm like, I can't do this. Not the way this is set
Right.
up. I'm not a victim. This is the wrong angle to come from. I'd heard of a couple of people on a podcast sharing about their Scientology experiences. And I'm like, if you want people to talk, then you have to make it more welcoming and not label me as a victim. I'm not a victim of this. I'm a responsible human being. I know how I participated, and I've got some questions about it, but I'm just not a victim.
Can I make a comment about that statement, the not a victim thing? We've been talking about this quite a bit in my book club. And I think that it's certainly in the landmark culture, and I would suspect in the Scientology index, all the human potential groups, the whole idea of being a victim is like the lowest of the lowest of the low thing that you could be. And I know, for sure in the United States for a long time, like this is the land of the cowboy. This is the land of, so is Australia, right? The land of like the fighters, there are no victims in Australia. There are no victims in the United States. Like we are the conquerors. We are not the victims. Like there's this culture where we have literally victimized the role of victim. And I'm a little bit on a war to revive, you know what? Sometimes we all are victims. We are being victimized by various forces and whatnot. And if we continue to vilify, like make the lowest of the low, the idea of being a victim, that somehow to be victimized means I wasn't responsible, I wasn't intelligent, my skirt was too short, so therefore that guy could do that thing to me. It's very in that keeping, and I think it's time for that mindset to die. I think it's time for us to stop victimizing victims, and that doesn't mean we need to stay in a victim mindset. One of my absolute favorite books, I quote it in my book, Ted, the Empowerment Dynamic, where David Emerald really talks about the Cartman drama triangle and how that is, can be impactful in negative ways, and how we can sort of flip that, right? So that I have it literally up on my wall house. So victim becomes creator. But you know what? Without acknowledging where I have been victimized, how can I can't create about that thing. Why am I creating? I'm on a huge campaign to make a whole marketplace out of the safe and ethical practice of personal development and wellness. And I'm part of the Seek Safely movement. I could not be creating that if I was not willing in this book to acknowledge how I was unwittingly victimized by an organization that I thought was up to changing the world and was giving me an opportunity to change the world too. So anyway, I just kind of I think there's something really important for us as a society to get off it about the whole thing of victim. Stop making it wrong. Stop assigning it bad connotation. I somehow am some lower person because in that moment I acknowledged that I was victimized. No, I did have somebody stalk me, and they didn't force me into sex. When the whole Me Too thing came up, I was like, oh, I had a Me Too experience. This guy, who happened to be a landmark person, by the way, a coach in my introduction leaders program, who stalked me, literally stalked me, followed me home, followed me to boyfriends' houses, followed me on dates. And, basically telling me that I was responsible, that I could choose, and that I should choose to have sex with him, and it'd be the best orgasm I ever had, and yada, yada, yada. And I finally said, yeah, okay, fine. Maybe if I have sex with this guy, he'll stop bothering me. And I happen to be in my new introduction leader power of I'm at choice and everything, and I'm responsible. I'm like, I think I'm all of at this point, I'm newly divorced out of an abusive relationship and feeling my power. And so sure, I'll say I'll screw you, and maybe you will give me a great orgasm and we'll go away like that, right? I mean, that's literally my mindset at the time, not a victim mindset at all. A responsible, at choice, like we can use all the landmark distinctions. Anyway, needless to say, he didn't go away. And then turns out he was stalking and pursuing other women in the leadership program. And one of them, who was much smarter than me, when he tried to force her into a sex act as he was driving her home from an evening session, she got out of his car and ran. And she called the police. And she called the center manager and she reported it. And I'm happy to say the center, I have to actually appreciate Landmark. They actually handled it quite well. Looking back, they probably with no small dose of, CYA going on, but the head of HR came to town and we all had to interview with him. And the police came over, the police came to interview me. And I'll never forget that police officer asking me, were you raped? And I didn't know what to say. I was like, well, it kind of felt rapey. I didn't want to have sex with him. But I do have to confess, like I did say yes, just hoping that if I did it once, he'd go away. So is that rape? And this police officer kept looking at me and he said, ma'am, were you raped? And it was almost like he was willing me to say yes. But I was so unwilling to see myself as a victim. And stalking wasn't really a term then. This was like 1997 or something. So I was so unwilling. I was responsible for everything that happened to me. And so I was so unwilling to consider myself as a victim that I was like, nah, I don't, I didn't want to have sex with him. It wasn't comfortable. He followed me everywhere for like months, blah, 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 all this stuff. And the police officer just kept looking at me. Ma'am, were you raped? Were you raped? And then I think he did say to go to sexual assault. He went to some lesser. And I just kept saying, well, no, I'm responsible. I'm responsible for everything that happens to me. I'm the source of it, straight out of my newly, minted Landmark leadership handbook, so to speak. So anyway, there you go. There's a story, but I'm really having a backlash against this, this way that we've come to think of victim and victimization.
Look, I hear it. I really do. However, as a staff person, I'd been trained in how to handle media. And the first thing was, they're going to change the story. They're going to want to make us the bad guys. So it was just the wrong angle to come in for me.
Yes.
Fresh.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think also for people that are now unsure about speaking, there's been somebody already in the comments here. She's written something and deleted it. Like they're thinking twice about how to actually say this.
Yeah.
So to come from, oh, you're a victim, it's like, I think it's just the wrong angle to come from. And it definitely was for me.
Especially when you've been told that to be a victim is the lowest thing to be. That there are, it is, I'm fairly confident at some point in Landmark, like it is that to be a victim it's simply a story. It's a place of no power, of no responsibility. It is vilified to be a victim.
And it's the very thing that we're in there to stop being.
Exactly.
So we want the opposite. You want powerful, responsible people where you're the author of your life. Okay, so now I know that we said we could have a look at why aren't people talking, but now that you've touched on the sexual confusion element of Landmark, I've got a story as well, this whole, when you said about the Me Too thing. So I think we could perhaps take it in this direction, and this could open up the minds of people to start questioning, was that sexual assault or not? And I see it that I know how I was in the sitting as a customer for Landmark in the forum, and seeing David Miles was the forum leader, and the way he managed people in the room is like that. He had people in the palms of his hand. I was like, I want some of that. And he made it seem like that was available to everybody. I was like, oh wow, that'd be really interesting. So I got very curious. So there's this thing about the Landmark forum leaders, they're kind of like the gods in the center. Right. When they come into the center, we clean it up. We're just on our best behavior. We're practicing our accountabilities and what we're going to say. And it's just like, it's a big event when the forum leader comes, especially in Australia, we didn't have many. Many forum leaders. So we would always have them come from the States, and they tended to be the same ones. It was kind of like Australia got adopted by a forum leader and they'd come over once or twice a year. So in Perth, we had forums once every 3 months was where it was at. In Melbourne, when I moved there, they were having one a month. So when they'd have a forum leader come over, they'd go to Melbourne, like they'd have special evenings about the forum, like they'd really make the most of the time. So there's one particular forum leader named Roger Armstrong, and Roger he's the one I talked about with the laptop last time.
Right.
But he had this way about him. He was a short, squatty man, kind of from Texas, like a cowboy.
Right.
And
Roger.
really brash. Like he would come in and there would always be somebody in tears every single time. Somebody would be crying. He had one staff person up against a wall at one time, poking his chest. He's like, "You are responsible." And when I hear the Scientologists talking about how they're handled by Scientology leaders, it was like that.
Yeah.
And I think, was he one of the original from Est?
I believe he was an S trainer. I don't remember fully, but I do know he was one of the sort of senior. So when I came in the 90s, he was there. I really got to know more of the forum leaders late 90s, particularly when I started my relationship with my now husband, who was at that time the registration manager, then the center manager. So we were sort of Seattle Center royalty. And so we got to spend time.
It's like
Yeah.
royalty.
My
Royalty.
daughter tells stories about, she both hated it and loved it. She would come into the center, and of course, everybody was like, "Oh, your mom and dad, da 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 da," and you're so lucky, and not, and she was like, okay. She just loved to play in the rooms with the chalkboards and all like stuff like that, and then. So she grew up a lot in the center environment. And she told me one time later, we went back many, many, many years and we visited the Seattle Center for something. This is in the later 2000s. She's like, "Mom, they didn't even know who we were." So, anyway, It was really funny. Yeah, she had, but yeah, there is, and I talk about that in my book too, that was a lot of the, I was like hosting the source of all of it. And all the top people in the old guard were calling me on the phone and I was getting to know them. And it was cool. It was cool.
Yeah.
I got on forum leader calls and, told them about the being a leader course and, so on and so on. So yeah, it's definitely the royalty in that area. And then for me, when I was kind of like, I was sort of adjacent to that circle, I was definitely very welcome and accepted in. That was heady stuff.
Yeah, it was really great. And so why I ask if Roger was part of the S training, because there was a similar way of being, if you like, for a landmark term, of the leaders that had come through Est. They were ruthless. Like they would keep the agreement was that people would stay in the room until something got complete. So when I started, there could be a forum could finish at 3 a.m. until somebody got complete. These were the old S trainers. That was just the way they worked. And the newer ones that came through, they wanted to go to bed. So they'd completed at 10 or 11 o'clock, midnight latest. But these other ones.
There was a policy at some point, one of the many
yeah.
changes along the way. You had to end by 10, which they mostly kind of did,
Yeah. But prior to that, it was unbelievable. And then people would still be back in the room at 9 a.m. the following morning. And the course supervisors would stay an extra hour afterwards to clean up and come an extra hour early. So these were their agreements working for free to manage the course because they didn't pay anybody. Everybody was
and this was also at a time when Landmark did come to understand that lack of sleep. So that, there's many filings. There's not really any lawsuits because Landmark is very adept at settling things, but there's many filings. You can read about them on the Cult Education Institute of people who suffered, mental breaks, everything from hospitalization to suicide in the Seattle area center where my husband was the manager. Right. And we had forums at least one a month, sometimes with the out of areas, multiples in a month. And he was continually dealing with breaks. And the big thing was you got to have people sleep. You got to have people sleep. And yet they continue these hours. And even when they went to 10 for the forum, but for the people who volunteered, the people who assist, they were called at that time. 1, 2 o'clock in the morning was not unheard of at all. It was common.
No, it was standard. That was pretty standard. Yeah. That's why, people, it was kind of like such a challenge to get people to assist because they'd hear about these long hours and then there's this part of them that was like, oh, I think I can do it and let's just put myself to the test. and then they come out of it. It's like being shell shocked, after the 3 days and one evening of
Well,
assisting.
it's part of that. Yeah, it's part of that whole endurance model that's so much a
Yes.
part of the potential. I mean, that's how Ginny Brown lost her daughter, to a ill-run kind of fakey sweat lodge at a spiritual warrior camp. Is the whole point was endurance. Go beyond your edge. Go, you can do it. You have more in you than you know. That narrative is so common in these groups. And Landmark's fairly mild compared to many of the other ones. I worked for a big yoga guru that was kind of his whole thing. And when I was coaching him and doing content for him, I put my foot down and I said, if you don't start taking more breaks and rolling back the hours, there was twice I actually threatened to walk off because he had an agreement to end by like 9 o'clock or something. And he's 9 o'clock and he's going and going and going. And these people have been doing power yoga and intense mental stuff. This is before I even understood about LGATs and what's going on in the brain in large group awareness trainings. And I just said, you're gonna, I just looked at him. I didn't know how to get through to him. I said, you're gonna get sued. Something really bad's gonna happen here. And and then later when I would meet Ginny and find out about Kirby, and Kirby and with 3 others died in that sweat lodge, and it was all inside of a narrative of pushing beyond your limits, going to the edge. You are capable of more. And again, Landmark had a very lightweight version of that. But it was these assisting hours, that you come in at 8, because if the forum starts at 9, the assistants are there at between 7 and 8. And then if the forum ends at 10 or 11, you're not going home till midnight. And then you're so wired up. Usually people go out, they're at TGI Fridays or something, having food and so you're getting home 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you're back up at 7. And something that we literally have our guests in the forum sign a form saying that they have to sleep and and a release and all this stuff, but they're doing it to the people who assist.
Yeah. And not paying. Yeah.
We did have, by the way, in Seattle, at least there's once I can remember very vividly of a volunteer who had a heart attack and died in the center. But we had a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So
there's a lot.
I know there's a lot. And I think from the S days, it was hardcore. That's why people went, because they wanted to have somebody address their assholeness. It was about, will expose your inner asshole. You can be with that, and then you can transform. But until you can be with that dark side, there's, you haven't got a chance in hell of transforming anything. So Roger Armstrong was really this old school forum leader, and he was just so blunt and kind of, in a way, a force to be reckoned with. So, but he would have women set up in different cities around the world. So he had somebody in Melbourne that when he went there, they'd just go out and go to the casino and, love going to the casino. And he was kind of like, that was his Melbourne girl, and he had them planted around the world. So when he came to Perth, there was something in me that was really wanted to see if I could be one of the girls. So, I was assisting on one of his programs. No, I was on staff. So I would come into the room occasionally. And at one point he came up to me and he said, I can see you're a player. I was like, oh, okay. I was already like in his good books there. And then he asked me if I wanted to go to the casino afterwards. So I'm like, oh, sure. I'm kind of like feeling like,
ooh, you're on the list now.
Yeah. So we went to the casino. I drove him there. We went to the casino. He gave me money. I think he gave me $100. I went to the roulette table and won 3 times as much at the end. Like, he's just like, you do whatever you want and we'll see you at the end. And then we met at the end. I gave him back his money because I'd made a couple of $100, and I drove him back to the hotel. And when I said goodnight, I was just kind of like this little girl, all giddy with excitement. And I leaned across to give him a kiss on the cheek, and he turned around and he stuck his tongue in my mouth. And I was just like, whoa. And he said, do you want to come up? And I was like, oh, no. Like, I wasn't prepared for that.
Right.
And that's his thing about, did I push the envelope? Did I cause that? Was I telling him, and it was just like so confusing. And I know from that was one of the pivotal points where I thought, something's wrong here. That wasn't good. That wasn't, I wasn't comfortable with it, obviously. So, and when I went back into work the next day, something had changed in me and I was different around him. And I'd shudder every time I thought that he was coming to Melbourne. Sorry, to Perth. I was in Perth at that time. And then I went to Melbourne when I did a reviewers forum for reviewers. This was just a whole room of people. I thought it would be confession time. We'd be able to say all the things that was wrong with Landmark. Instead, I walked out with a sex and intimacy registration, a course supervisor packet. I reviewed the ILP. So I was back in the centre every night as somebody who assisted at that time. So as a course supervisor, Roger Armstrong, of course, came to lead. And it was a little bit awkward. I was the assistant course supervisor. He annihilated the lead supervisor. So I had to step up and be his partner at the back of the room. And,
oh, wow.
And he asked a question. I gave him some information about Tasmania. Like, this is another state in Australia being a 3-hour ferry ride. Like, I just said something offhand. And he said that at the front of the room, and people are just like, what are you talking about? It's like, it's a whole day to get to Tasmania. It's like he got belittled in the room because he hadn't got his facts right. And there was, I think I suffered a bit as a result of that. He was like,
I was gonna say, did he retaliate?
Yeah.
Because they forum leaders, I mean, not all of them. I mean, my first forum leader was fabulous. He's still a good friend of mine. We laughed our way through the whole forum. So they, they had quite different personalities, but for sure the est ones were the more harsh and direct and inappropriate, honestly, just very inappropriate times and so on. But they did not like being made not to look good. Like that's an absolutely intolerable thing. And and I know the abuse that the staff around Werner suffers is, in no small part for any tiny infraction, whether it's a wrinkle on a shirt or a missing button or, anything that he thinks might have him look bad that is worthy of punishment and of some sort or another, retaliation of some sort or another. Well, there's a deal. We should make sure to put in this. So this book is actually out of print, but we now have somebody on a team has actually found the PDF of this off of Web Archive, and we should go ahead and put this in your show notes. For anybody so if you really want to understand the est culture, this is the story of Werner from the time he leaves Philadelphia as a young man all the way to where he leaves the country, kind of. I had a lot of fun with Chris Shelton on the run because, the lore was the Scientologists were out to get him, but that wasn't, I have no doubt that was probably true, but that was just part of the story. I mean, what had happened is in the Marin County paper, this fabulous reporter, I now have her documents as well. She exposed the whole story of the abuse that wasn't just happening around Werner, but that was systemic in the est leader and program culture. And I would just love to say that it all died in 1990 when Werner left. But what I have come to find out since the publication of my book is that culture is alive and well inside of Landmark. It might be a little bit more polite, not as obvious, but it is the story you're telling. I have heard stories of that, similar kinds of happening as recently as 2018, 2019. Right now, the forum is being done mostly online. So in a weird sort of way, going online might save Landmark's bacon because so many of these inappropriate behaviors and things just kind of aren't as possible online. Mm-hmm. But I'm hearing, stuff, I'm getting calls from people of, everything from wildly inappropriate to outright, like you should call 911 kind of behavior happening behind the scenes. So some people might be listening thinking like, oh, great, Anne and Dale, those are funny stories from the 1990s. But we're talking about that because that was our direct experience. But I can assure you I'm hearing from people who are telling similar stories to the one Dale and I are happening in 3, 4, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, really recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're hoping that some people are, start to feel brave enough and courageous enough to come and talk about this. And for me, why? A lot of people say, but Landmark does so much good. Landmark does so much good. I'm not going to deny Landmark made a difference in my life, but they've had 50 years and a lot of publicity about the good they do. But we need to talk about this dark side because it's not happening just in Landmark. Landmark has a lot of spin-offs. Landmark has a lot of people that do Landmark programs and then go and do their thing and replicate these behaviors. And, we're not going to get rid of all the narcissistic, crazy, culty, guru-y leaders. But as a consumer, we can start to really educate ourselves.
Mhm.
And,
And change the culture. This is how it's feedback. And like what I was saying before, the part of the culture at that time was to bring out the inner asshole, like to really people to be with their dark sides. So the same applies for Landmark as a corporation. Like really get with the dark side of what's happening so that then the transformation can really happen. But if it's just going to get swept under the table, if people are so afraid to talk, then how is this going to be addressed? And how can
we have time? Do we have time for that story? You have the best story I've heard of a person that's evidence of why people are afraid to talk. Do we have time for that story? Would that be a good kind of tail end story? Because I've heard a lot of versions. A lot of people are afraid to talk because they don't want to damage the work. They don't want people to invalidate the transformation. There's a lot of reasons. They're completely indoctrinated that they are responsible. That's one of the biggest ones I've heard from staff member after staff member is, oh, I thought it was all me. Oh, I thought it was all me. Oh, I thought that I deserved that. Oh, I mean, even Eric Rojas, who's now talking publicly about being choked. And, but he really thought, I remember when he first told the story, he's like, well, but maybe I kind of like deserve that. Or maybe he was joking. And,
but that's exactly what I gave with the example with Roger. It's like, was that sexual abuse? Did I provoke that? That's why I was so confused. It's like I couldn't even talk about it. This is the first time I've spoken about it publicly. Because there's something like it was.
That's why the responsibility distinction, that is an example of it being weaponized against ourselves. And again, I don't want to give Landmark a break exactly, but I do want to acknowledge that I think that mindset is very societal as well. Like we don't want to, especially in our sort of hardcore, independent, fierce, independent, survivor cultures that both you and I live in our countries. But but in Landmark and similar organizations, I'm certainly hearing about it as I'm getting to know these Scientology guys more, that weaponizing of, oh, but that person touched you inappropriately. What were you doing? How were you causing the matter of that? So it's very reinforced by the very ideas that are taught in the programs. And that I think a lot of people don't understand and don't see until it's too late.
Yeah.
Because at the moment you think you're just being coached. I'm being coached to be responsible. But let's tell the story of it because I just loved it. I was like, okay, it's real. Because I had heard some kind of whispers of similar sort of things happening at that level, like people being kind of hunted down and basically, if you couldn't be seduced to be quiet, being threatened to be quiet. And there's a lot of payoffs. Like we're now finding a lot of lawsuits where people are paid off to not speak about the things that happened to them. So, but anyway, so I would love for you to tell that story. And I'm just going to back it up by saying I've heard not this exact thing, but similar scary level of tactics used on former staff, particularly.
It's definitely a Scientology tactic. So this started, there was an annual staff conference, and this was just at the cusp of the old kind of S days being put in the cupboard, and now this new Landmark Education Corporation LAC 2020 was being introduced, and we were there to find out how these changes were going to be implemented and what they were. So it was the staff from, and this was our region was Australia, New Zealand. So Tirzah Cohen came over from the States to train us up on this new Landmark.
One of the originals.
Yeah, one of the originals. And I stood up and I was just being like the old ditzy kind of just babbling on about transformation and how much I love my job and all the passion and stuff. And she cut me short with, no, we're changing that, sit down. It was basically like, sit down and shut up in front of like my peers. And it was, I think I'd been on staff for about a year. And it was, no, I hadn't been on staff for that long. Actually, no, yes, I had, because it was the second staff conference. But I was so embarrassed, and I remember that this feeling was like I'd been ripped apart. It was really, it altered something within me. I was really shocked that something changed quite dramatically in how I'd been thinking and how this new future was being presented. It was about infinity. Infinity doesn't exist. There are only finite numbers, and everything gets listed. Absolutely everything in your mind is going to get written out on pieces of paper. We're going to list everything and we're going to schedule them in time so that they happen. And this is how it's going to work. You're going to get diaries, not that we're going to be given diaries, but you're going to get diaries. This is how they'll be laid out, and this is how you'll be scheduled in, and you'll have meetings with your center manager. And I was just like, whoa, like I was shaking inside. And my center manager came to me at one point. She said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, but I just couldn't speak. I didn't know. I didn't know the answer. And then we came back to Perth to debrief, and that's where we had to declare ourselves accountable for the future LEC 2020, or we couldn't be on staff. There was no, they had the pyramid on the screen.
Yes.
The top being accountable, the bottom was just like this kind
I
of.
think we talked about that in our last.
Yeah, that's right. So we had to then declare, and I was kind of like, well, I just landed myself in this new job, and I did love the work, and I didn't know what accountable was, but sure, if that was the only way I could be there, then that was the only way I could be there. So then I settled into the new future LEC 2020, really struggled with it. There's the whole thing about having finite numbers, and infinity didn't exist. So later I got to, so since leaving, I've learned a lot from people who were ex-center managers, a lot that went to New Zealand. I don't know what the hell was going on with New Zealand, but the Melbourne Centre was churning out center managers. They'd come back after 3 months. And I got talking to a couple of people, one who said that there was an example with Tirza in the States. So she was accountable for the self-expression and leadership program all around the world. And somebody left. It was a staff person. And there's more examples of this, staff people just not rocking up to work, just not telling their families where they're going, catching a plane or a train somewhere and disappearing themselves. So this woman.
Is it leaving Landmark or coming on to staff? Did they disappear?
They were on staff and just disappeared.
Oh God.
They just didn't show up to work. So I know of an example in Melbourne.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So they're yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, because that's one of the only ways to get off, because they're gonna, especially if you're any good, they're gonna like talk to you and process you until you get that it's your integrity and your word, and you're
responsible for the experience.
You're responsible, and yeah.
You
have to pretty much cease and desist them if you go to leave. And I mean, this is advice I'd give anybody who wants to step out of the academy or anything. It's a good idea to just say no communication, at least for a period of time, because it's a very
there wasn't an option for no communication. It was like saying I want to complete was an opening for a conversation.
That's true.
Treated to. I was like, oh great, so you're there. Let's talk about that. So some people just left. They just packed up and moved to a different state. Didn't tell their family. Like I know there are examples of that. So this one particular woman left Tirza, and of course it leaves them in the lurch. Then who's going to fill the gap? Who's going to lead the programs? Who's going to make the calls? So it's a big decision for people to do that. So this person did that under Tirza's accountability. So she's off, in a different state, living her life. And then somebody who did work with Tirza saw this woman at a phone booth. And she called Tirzah and she said, I've just found, call her Joe Blogs, I just found Joe, she's on the phone. And Tirzah said, get me the number of the phone booth. What number is it? And Tirzah then called 911, intercepted that call. So this woman's like having a conversation with her family, talking about all the things she's going to do. And then she gets Tirzah Cohen in her ear. You left us in the lurch. You will suffer for that. Like she intercepted, I don't know exactly what she said, but she left this woman in a complete, like I was left as like a complete state of shock that somebody would go to that degree for vengeance, which is
How very Scientology. That was one of the most, Landmark's been accused of being Scientology light, which the more I learn about the distinctions, I'm, the ideas, right? I'm seeing that more and more, but the practices, there's a guy in our group who was in Scientology who then did Landmark, and he said, oh, you guys don't even know, what abuses. I should share this story with him. So because that's the kind of stuff. And, but we could just start with asking, why would people feel that they need to run to get away from it?
Well, there's that, and there's also, where is this woman? Who are the people that have been so damaged and thought that this was the only way that they could leave? Where are you? Please come and just share your experience, and let's talk about, like my experience with Roger. Was that sexual abuse? Like your experience with the person you had that with. It's like, where's the line here? Is there a line? Has it been crossed? How do we clean this up in a way?
And what does it look like? I think it's important to see what it looks like when the ideas and distinctions that are taught that can and do give power in some circumstances and applications also are weaponized in ways that cause big damage. I mean, I am just rocked by the number of people, ex-staff and program leaders, that are coming out of the word work, talking to me and seeking therapy. I mean, I'm working now with a cult recovery therapist. We're looking at putting up a group together just for Landmark ex-staff. So we'll be making these resources and things available. I mean, I was mad this morning. I was like, why am I now suddenly cleaning up Landmark's mess? Well, why? Because we spoke out. We said, there's a mess here. That's all we did. We said, there's a mess. There's a mess. We should start talking about that mess. And the other thing I want people to know is it's safe to talk. I want people to know. And also,
if there's no exit, like it's just basic safety procedures. When you enter a building, people know where the exit is. You have to know how to get out in the event of something going wrong.
Right.
Where is the exit for Landmark? There isn't anything. There's no way to communicate with people about their experience. Like it doesn't exist. So it's not, they're not going to come up with anything. So we have to. And this is
and they'll tell you, I mean, and I'm sure we'll get comments on this podcast, that they'll tell you, but people can leave at any time. That is people, if at this day and age, we are now really starting to understand coercive control. And that is just simply not true. And we've known that for generations as we've seen, women who are brutalized horribly in marriages and had no way to go. If your entire community, all of your friends is in there, if you have been trained to believe that everything not working is because of you, your lack of responsibility, your lack of integrity, and after a while, it doesn't take very long of that when you look yourself, if something isn't, the target isn't being met, you're going to your manager with a confession about your drawers that aren't clean and that bill you didn't pay and, whatever, right? Like you're trained to look always at yourself as the source of the problem. So that, like an abusive husband that convinces their partner that you're terrible and I'm beating you for your own good, it's very, very much the same. The whole ridiculous notion of ruthless compassion. Well, I'm going to support you and your integrity, and we're going to get to the source of it, and da 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 da. And that's the price of admission. That's the price of admission into the inner circles, into the leadership bodies, into the cool people crowd, so that starts to get paid. It's not everywhere. It's not everywhere in every moment, but it's a lot. And particularly in the, I highlight, underscore, put a circle around the centers division, which is what most people interact with when they interact with Landmark. And, you know, I believe that because the Rosenbergs, it's run by, you know, I mean, the whole thing is run by the Rosenbergs, you know, Werner Erhard, who is, you know, John Paul or Jack Rosenberg. Yeah, you know, Harry Rosenberg, Joan Rosenberg, you know, near as I can tell when I'm learning about psychology, there's something really wrong in that family. And because these kind of abusive tactics combined with the times, you know, I mean, Werner's 88 years old and yeah, there was a lot of things acceptable in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that are acceptable now. But it's, you can't leave. You're absolutely right. You have to either bolt, get sick. So a lot of people get very, 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 very sick. Lots of strokes, heart attack, cancer.
Well, one center manager had no iron. It was like she was depleted. She had blood tests afterwards. She couldn't understand what was happening in her body. She was almost lost her eyesight. And she had tests and she hadn't, her iron count was so low. It's like the will is depleted in people.
Yeah.
Adrenal fatigue, exhaustion, depression. These are
which then adds to the, you know, you can't, and then, you know, people are telling you, I had a gal tell me who was on the London staff and she passed out on the, you know, in the tube. She was going, you know, going to work and she was very ill and she passed out and they were very gracious with her for a week. Get some rest, take time for, and then it was like, okay, now who are you being that you're still sick? Like, you know, well, you're just on it. Well, you're just, you know, so for a week they were very gracious. And then it was like, no, you need to get your butt back in here. And what's wrong, in fact, is that you're not being your word as a staff member. And that's why you're sick. You need to come to work. You know, that's the weaponization of those ideas. And it honestly, Dale, it breaks my heart because it takes ideas that actually can create power in people's lives when used in, you know, in healthy ways and twist them and turn them until you're so jumbled up and you know, you're no longer operating in healthy ways. And that's it. We'll have to, I know we're running out of time. We'll have to do a whole episode about what it's really like when you leave staff and you go to try to get a job.
Yeah. That's a life after Landmark. But the thing is, it sounded easy, like, well, let's just talk about life after Landmark, but we've got to get this, the context, like what it's like for people to be within the organization, what it's like to function or survive inside that organization, to be able to get what it's like to leave and how confusing and debilitating it is to have to kind of pull yourself back together without any support, that there hasn't been any support. That's been the issue. And it's one of the reasons that I spoke out. It was like, I want people to know that whatever you're going through, something is wrong, and you're not alone. Really, the thing is, you're not alone. Let's share stories and have a look at some of the great there, because there are some great things that happened as well. They're really funny. Those extremes, really extreme, polarizing. But one of the things that when you were speaking, something that came to mind was something that somebody said to me privately, was that the perpetrator is rewarded in Landmark. It's the perpetrator is the one, we have to submit to the perpetrator. That's what the training was. So they're not going to change. What can you change about yourself to, it's kind of in a way condoning the behavior and the sexual abuse.
Wow, that's really powerful. Okay, we could do a whole hour discussion about that. I think that's really, I'm going to think about that, but I hadn't thought of it in that direction. But it is really true. I mean, I'm so tired of people saying, oh, you talk to somebody who do something about it. Those people have been talked to ad nauseum for years.
Yes, that's right.
They've been sued. They've been, you know, Werner was run out of the country. You know, I mean, the consequences of the dark side, of the negative behavior, of the weaponization of the distinctions. All of those things have happened 10 times over. And, you know, I love what you're saying. I was just blown away this Sunday sitting around. I said, I just don't understand. Why are these people still in business? Why are the Rosenbergs not in jail? Like, I don't get it. And, you know, a big part of it is because all of the information has not been brought together so that the whole picture can be seen. And
it's also been really it's been really easy to attack through these centralized organizations. The example that I gave before about the ABC, it's just send them a cease and desist letter, bring the powers of the lawyers in. But now the world is very different. Now that we have the internet and anybody can start a channel, anybody can just get a YouTube account, start a channel, it's free, start talking, and we can start connecting with each other and bring all these invisible threads together. And that weaves a blanket, so to speak, that we can now, that's much harder to attack. It's much more difficult.
It's good to know, so anybody should reach out to me that is interested in being in a conversation for healing and deconstructing and healing, because we have a group that's meeting every Friday and sharing and talking and crying and laughing, and and it's being sourced by mental health professionals, and and the biggest thing I'm hearing from people is like, oh my God, I thought I was alone. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just me. I thought that, everything from I was the source of the failure, and I've lived 20 years in that failure, to just I experienced really horrific physical abuse, verbal assault. And I thought that was, I didn't, all the way up to, like me, when I was talking with an attorney in 2022 and discovered that verbal assault was a thing and it was illegal. I had no idea that somebody couldn't just call you names and threaten your livelihood and threaten your person. And I knew that was wrong. But I would just I was sort of enculturated to think, oh, well, that person's just running a racket. They're on it.
That's right.
And, or their amygdala is hijacked or whatever thing. And, and particularly the way I was trained as a listener, I would just, be with that until it passed. Totally unaware of the impact on me, the impact on people, on our nervous system, on our psyche.
And on others around us as well. This filters out into different organizations too. So we can't contain the damage. The damage spreads, and that's what has happened.
It also doesn't go away. That's another thing.
That's right.
We think that if we leave the environment, it will go away. I so wish that was true, but it won't. I have, a very dear friend of mine who's currently, that's what she's engaged in. If I'm not in the conversation, then the impact of it won't be there. And, if I learned anything walking the trauma journey with my daughter, and if anybody studies trauma at all, the body keeps the score. And which is why you have so many staff members with, disease and illness and whatnot, because the body is keeping the score. The body is screaming out, this is not right. This isn't, this isn't appropriate. I can't, you have to process it.
We have an inner authority. And when we don't listen to it, then it's easy for that inner authority to dismantle. The external authority becomes so great that we start living under the will of somebody else. I mentioned artificial intelligence. It's an artificial intelligence takes over until we can start trust our own internal authority. So today, we've given some examples of just 3 things about sexual possible. Was that, up to you? Was that sexual abuse? What happened with me? What happened with Anne? What's happened with you? Like the people who are listening, what are you not sure about? Like examples of things that happened that have kind of left you with a, whoa, what was that? Let's talk about them and open it up to the public. Public scrutiny is the greatest disinfectant. We can have other people start to contribute. And this way we can work it out. It's like, in a way, if it is that you want to make Landmark the greatest organization that can be, this is what's going to contribute. Because as it is, it can't survive. It's dying. It actually is. I've heard the numbers that are coming through. It's appalling that like they're really dying. They're not going to survive.
They've actually been dying for a long time. I mean, even I did the math the other day on their latest press packet. Says they had 3.5 million people. Well, that sounds really great, but now divide that by 40. That's less than 80,000 a year for, a company that has offices, what it used to have offices in 40 cities around the world or whatever.
Yeah,
you
but
know,
they're counting the statistics. We're relying on them. There could be people that've just had a phone
oh
call.
yeah. Well, we have in our group of people that are talking privately. So if you're not ready to go full public, there's groups that we can connect you with where you can talk at least with others who are now talking to each other.
Mhm.
And we have at least 3 of the company statisticians in there that are like, oh yeah, those numbers are fudged all over the place. So I
Absolutely.
mean, we're learning there people are looking for financial crimes now. Like it's you know, and maybe they won't find anything. I don't know, but at least they're looking. And you know, and you know, people are questioning the ESOP. Wait, what is this? I'm a shareholder. Like people are waking up to, wait, I'm a shareholder. Well, wait, what are my rights as a shareholder? Well, that's a really good question. What are your rights as a shareholder? And you know, let's find out. What are your rights? Have you seen a financial report? As I understand it, one of your rights is to be able to see the financial report. Let's get some people, call that world headquarters number, ask for those financial reports. You know, Landmark
And
says that it's
when are the
with
meetings? When can I attend? Who's on board? Yeah, this is standard normal operating procedures
yeah.
for any
Yeah.
organization.
And you know what? Maybe we'll find out that the organization is what it says it is.
Yes.
We might, you know, I'm open to that. The more people I hear from, the more doubts I have. But I want to be clear, I'm open to that. I'm as open to that as I am to the other. So, and that's what critical thinking starts to look like. I love Chris Shelton has a really great thing about a great quote. I'm going to make a social post out of it about what it really looks like to think critically. And you can't think critically when the information is being withheld.
That's right. Mhm.
Yeah.
And given that this organization is all about sharing, and you know, there's nothing that you can't say, and we can hear it, and just be bold and say it, and go with the flow from after that. It's like, okay, we're starting the conversation now.
Well, I heard somebody was asking of the Technico licensee, somebody told, you know, well, what are you going to do about Anne's book? What are you going to do about Anne's book? Like we're out here trying to sell the Being a Leader course, and now there's this book questioning, which I don't even actually question anything. Clearly, this person has not read my book, or they would know I'm not even questioning anything about the course itself. In fact, I'm pretty complimentary. But rather than shutting up the people who are asking questions, rather than shutting up the victims, why don't we hear what they have to say and then make the changes or not? But, you know, be, as the work itself says, be accountable. That's my invitation. That's my call to action for Landmark and those that are graduates.
Set an example, actually set an example rather than tell people how. Because
if you can't read my book, which honestly, I mean, Dale, you've read it. It's very
it's a really
honest, very light.
Yeah,
it's
easy
very,
read,
it's an easy read, but it's very factual. Everything in there is backed up by you know, documentation and whatnot. But compared to what I know now, what's in there is like barely the tippiest of the iceberg. It was just those few things that happened that came to my attention and that had me start to re-examine and start to look. That's really what gets revealed in the book. But you know, I've heard they're saying on some Landmark staff, why would you want to read that book? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to read a book from, you know, a 20-year veteran who was, you know, highly regarded? And, you know, and to those that are out there kind of going, well, we don't know what happened to Anne. Nothing happened to Anne. I am the same Anne that I have always been. I just had some new information come, and I had to wrestle with it when evidence was presented to me that was undeniable and unavoidable. I had to look newly. Just like what I did in the Landmark Forum, when I did the Landmark Forum, and I got challenged to look at whether that guy who was doing drugs, beating up my son and cheating on me was the right man for me. You know, as soon as I saw those things, I was like, you know what? I think I should divorce this guy. And I did. And, you know, what I've seen in Landmark recently, I'm like, I think I should divorce Landmark now after 26 years. So I did. And I am. It doesn't mean I don't honor and respect.
How about for the next session that we talk about, share some of the stories of people that have shared with us privately, given it, you know, let us know that you're okay with that. I won't use names because there's been some doozies. And let's just open up that conversation. And if you have something that you'd like for us to talk about, let's then email it to me, email it to Anne.
And I'll tell
and we talk
people,
about
because
that.
they'll wonder, because you and I are public, we can tell those stories and safely for us, and for as long as we know those people, we're vetting to make sure that there's it's credible, it's valid, and that they will, if we were to be attacked, that they will substantiate those stories. So just as this public service announcement, if you don't want your name to be known, but you want your story to be out there, we can do that. But to do that, we just have to know that you'll back us up if the worst were to happen. But I can promise, for me, I'll continue to be as respectful as I can be to Landmark, and my desire is not to see them burned to the ground. I'm not out for revenge or vengeance. I'm out for truth. I'm just out for truth, so that people can make full and informed decisions about what they're participating in, because that's when they're safe, they can get the value. I am about the safe and ethical practice of personal development, and that includes Landmark.
And for me, I don't care about Landmark. I really don't. Whether they die, whether they grow, I don't care. What I am concerned about are the people like me that left and have nowhere to go, unemployable.
Yeah.
I'm really questioning what happened, don't know where they fit, particularly the people of the leadership realm, because that's when you're like full of confidence, thinking, oh, well, I can go out into the world, but what am I? What is a participation manager? How do my skills fit into this role, and how could I do that? And it's like not fitting. That not
Beautiful.
is really challenging. So that's what I'm about. I don't care
Awesome.
about Landmark. I really don't.
Awesome.
Okay, so
Well, I
on
think
that
that's a
note,
wrap, Dale. I think that's enough for today. I so appreciate these conversations. I can't tell you just, it's just to be able to just talk about it and explore and look, and and I have a therapist and a spiritual teacher and stuff like that, but just to be able to talk with somebody who's been there, there's just nothing like it. So I hope other people will have the courage to step forward and at least let us tell their stories, and hopefully
yes,
come up and tell their own stories. Yeah.
yes,
It's so healing. It's not
I know.
easy, but it is healing. It's very
Yeah.
liberating. It's very healing.
It is like being in the forum when you have that conversation with the person that you've been avoiding on, walk on the other side of the street, can't say that. It's that liberating, like the sense of life that returns.
Yes.
It's really well worth it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
All
Thank
right.
you so much. I will send you the link to the outrageous betrayal PDF.
Yeah, we'll put everything in the show notes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, beautiful. Thanks, everyone. See you.